Welcome to the Celestial Saga channel. Have you ever wondered how aliens pass human tests? Today we're going to tell you about the tense moments in the training camp where different species face the most brutal methods of human training. How do you survive when your armor is your only chance for survival? Let's find out together. Alina had never been this exhausted in her entire life. She didn't even know bones could hurt like this. But the ache in hers was intense. If it weren't for her sister's visit, her feet might have completely given out at the ankles. The new Yorpal footwear designs were making a significant difference for the recruits struggling through the grueling human boot camp, and they were becoming wildly popular back on their home planet, Dagmar Prime. Many of the humans insisted that a soldier's journey started with the feet, but Alina couldn't fathom how they managed to run around in those bulky casement-like boots they wore every day. Of course, Alina was one of the Yorpal, a semi-bestial alien species with snouts and paws. The humans called them furries, a term that never failed to annoy them, and they took a strange joy in mocking the vibrant colors of their fur. Alina's fur was a muted yellow, reminiscent of mustard, so she was faring better than the blue or green-skinned Yorpals. To her left sat Leo, a poit, who was using a sharp spike device, something the humans swore by to clean his toenails. Poits were a short, slender race, often called space elves by humans, and they enjoyed more respect than the Yorpal with athletic builds and eyes that were fully colored, except for a faint lighter spot marking their pupils. Poits had it better than others, though their pointed ears often made them the target of teasing far gentler than the mocking the Yorpals received. On the other side of Alina was Dorian, a carlican, a lizard-like species. Carlicans had a cobra-like hood, forked tongues, and tails. They walked on legs like the humans, and had hands with long, clawed fingernails. The three of them, along with the other recruits, sat in the pre-dawn light of Missouri, barely able to keep their eyes open, wondering what new challenge awaited them. The humans seemed to take pleasure in organizing their training bases in a way that resembled a chaotic star system, with troopers marching or running between lessons or drills. Sure, the starship training facilities and barracks had armories and what humans called DFIC, their dining facility. But these were only used on slow days when the weather was too nice to train indoors. Alina had woken up with the other recruits in their unisex barracks after only 5 hours of sleep, thanks to the constant noise of passing gas and endless bickering that had become the soundtrack to her nights. A new drill sergeant, a human man named Gordon, was banging a metal trash can to wake them up, his blonde mustache still coated in powdered sugar from his morning donut. "Up and at 'em, my little bastard children, time to train," he shouted, slamming the trash can again for emphasis. Alina had never seen a trash can like that before, not even on the base or the space stations, and she wondered if it was just some absurd human drum. She dragged herself up from her cot, her brain still foggy with sleep, and remembered it was Fridays meant special lessons, typically painful or terrifying, before they were allowed a brief break on the base. Strangely, they had been told not to pack their rucksacks, but just assault bags with food and water, and the entire company set off into the dark early morning to their training site. According to the drill sergeants, they weren't worthy of transport yet and had to walk for a few more weeks. Leo hated this, especially because his legs were so short. Walking with the humans was a strenuous, cardio-heavy ordeal. To make matters worse, the Poits, known for their skills with vehicles, detested even walking to the kitchen from their living rooms. The Jinn had finally caught up with them, though they were behind in the training and had only just finished the basics. The Jinn, a warlike species, had taken to human training with surprising enthusiasm. They wore animal-shaped masks, usually bird-like, reflecting the personality of the wearer, but only the humans in Carlican found them interesting. To the Yorpal and Poit, they were a bore, constantly fiddling with their forearms and pestering the humans about more training. The Jinn resembled humans in many ways, just with blue and green skin, adorned with strange freckles. No one knew what their heads looked like, but the mask suggested their skulls might be somewhat triangular. Despite her promotion, Alina felt burdened by the responsibility to look after the other soldiers, a task graciously assigned to her by Drill Sergeant Harrison. Thankfully, it was just Dorian, Leo, and a Jinn named Jarek to keep an eye on. Jarek was an excitable male, and he seemed to cling to Alina like Velcro against a carpet. "So what happens now?" Jarek asked, his golden eyes glowing from within his mask. As he looked around, Alina was still trying to shake off the sleepiness that clung to her, unsure how this four-armed maniac was even awake. "We wait," she replied, still fighting to keep her eyes open, her body screaming for a nap on the grass. Probably weapons training or something. Leo, rubbing his eyes, had eaten a rare energy paste he'd managed to save from a chow break 3 days ago. He was hoping the paste would kick in soon. "This isn't weapons training," he muttered. "I memorized the circuit map. This is armor training." "Armor training?" Dorian hissed thoughtfully, his chin screeching as he yawned. "Are we going to be using armored vehicles?" Alina asked, chuckling. "I highly doubt it, remember? We lucked out with heavy shock infantry from the training roster," she replied. "The most we'll probably see are heavily armored personnel carriers and drop pods." "Drop pods?" Jarek asked eagerly, scanning the area from the grassy hill where they sat above the training site. "Do you see any? Are we getting dropped in today? I've heard the human ones have a massive machine gun that pops out for cover." Leo nodded. "Those are the ones they carry a platoon and drop them with full combat gear. They're really effective. I saw them when the humans came to liberate my homeworld from the Daramare." Jarek's eyes lit up as he gazed at the sky. They came down like burning stars, spirits of vengeance bringing justice to the wicked. Alina rolled her eyes. "That's just a poetic way of describing re-entry thrusters." The group sat quietly, discussing the human vehicles, while the rest of the recruits struggled to stay awake. Alina, feeling the weight of her promotion, stood with unsteady legs to discipline a female recruit who was starting to flag. As Arun, the head disciplinary female in their unit, it was her responsibility to handle any wayward Yorpal women. This particular one was an easy case, as Alina simply cuffed the purple Yorpal lightly on the back of her ears. "Anye, Arun," the female muttered, rubbing the back of her ears. "Anye," Alina replied. Jarek glanced at Leo, tilting his head. She said she was sorry. Leo, who had learned both the Yorpal and Karlikan languages, nodded. "Alina's their female boss now." "Curious," Jarek said, tapping the side of his mask. One by one, the personal vehicles of the training site staff arrived. Alina noticed with visible disdain that 10 of the cars were owned by the range safety officers. "What are they doing here?" Alina groaned, pulling her knees up to her chest and resting her forehead against them. "They only show up when someone's shooting." "Up on your feet, recruits," Drill Sergeant Killjoy bellowed, clapping his hands. "Time for confidence training." Leo exchanged a glance with Dorian. "I'm feeling confident." "I'm not going to enjoy this," Dorian muttered. "I'm confident this is another torture method disguised as training," Alina grumbled, brushing the grass off her tail as she stood. Dorian got to his feet as well. "I'm confident this will be enlightening." "I'm confident this is going to be fun," Jarek said, tapping his fist to his chest. Alina lowered her eyelids and glared at the Jinn and Karlikan. "I'm confident I hate the two of you." Leo chuckled, swinging his assault pack straps over his shoulders. The company filed into the large concrete building, quickly realizing that, although it looked like an armory, it only contained armor, no weapons at all. These were the combat suits used by the humans' heavy shock infantry, and even Alina could see why they were so effective. The suits themselves looked downright medieval, not in a humorous way, but like actual suits of olive drab armor. As the drill sergeants began explaining the complex systems inside the armor, Alina raised her hand. Drill Sergeant Harrison nodded at her, still holding one of the T-visored helmets. "Where's the energy pack, Drill Sergeant?" Alina asked, lowering her hand. "Energy pack for what, Specialist?" Drill Sergeant Harrison asked, her short blonde hair catching the light. Oddly, Alina looked confused. "For the energy shield, Drill Sergeant?" Drill Sergeant Harrison's face slowly shifted into a grin. "Energy shield? These suits don't have energy shields." "Then what stops the plasma bolts or energy beams from hitting the armor?" Apoyd asked. Raising his arm just after asking the question, Drill Sergeant Harrison gestured to the armor. "You're supposed to shoot at the armor, privates. Why else would we design the plates to withstand it?" "They hit us!" a Yorpal cried out, his face a mix of fear and horror. "How are we supposed to shrug off a plasma bolt?" A pen ricocheted off the Yorpal's head, causing many recruits to stifle their laughter, though the human recruits seemed to struggle the most. "How are we supposed to shrug off a plasma bolt, Drill Sergeant?" The Yorpal corrected himself, rubbing his head where Drill Sergeant Harrison had pegged him. Drill Sergeant Killjoy patted the well-worn suit. "These are designed to stop nearly every type of munition round found on the battlefield. While they do wear down over time, they can stop plasma, laser, caster, and bullets alike." "The Tolkien weave bodysuit," he added. "What's a Tolkien?" Apoyd asked, raising his hand before asking the question, unlike the others. "Is it a rare mineral?" Drill Sergeant Harrison chuckled, more like, who is Tolkien? When this bodysuit material was being developed, the project was named Myrtle, a nod to his book, You know what? It's not important. The suit, Drill Sergeant Killjoy continued, giving a knowing look to Drill Sergeant Harrison, who had a bit of a fiction obsession. It can stop nearly all edged and pointed weapons, low-power pistol munitions, and even dampen the effects of blunt force weapons. This chest plate has an inner pouch for medical supplies, emergency water that's gathered from sweat, a docking port for a data slate, and emergency stimulant needles that will inject you to stop bleeding and reduce pain. Drill Sergeant Harrison pointed to the helmet. The Mark III combat helmet is a digital asset suit that feeds real-time information to your helmet, like rounds in your weapon, troop movements, and a speaker and microphone for communication on the battlefield. The armor attaches directly to the shoulder guards, which in turn are connected to the chest plate, making it an easy slip-on suit that tightens automatically once you put it on. The leg armor is a single piece as well, slipped on like climbing rigging or, if you prefer, an incredibly awkward pair of lingerie. Drill Sergeant Harrison explained, pointing to the leg armor, that it has the same kind of plating as the chest piece, designed to protect the thighs, knees, and shins. Remember, always face the enemy because the back of your legs is unprotected, and try to avoid getting shot in the groin. You can attach an armor plate there if you feel the need, but it will make sitting uncomfortable. Many veterans either ignore it or just use a simple soft armor insert for their underwear. Alina noticed many in the bleachers mentally making a note to buy the insert. Alina raised her hand again, and Drill Sergeant Harrison pointed to her. So we just take it? There's no generator to stop rounds, no deflector generator, no magnetic field reactors? Alina asked, assuming humans use the same armor tech as others. We just get shot? You just get shot, Drill Sergeant Harrison confirmed, nodding. During the combat movements of Irmar's second, Daramar hit us with a massive EMP and TMP strike, trying to knock out our electronics and powered weapons while it crippled the defenses of the Yorpals and Zetron. We were unaffected. Sure, we couldn't use our helmet electronics, but the humans were able to push through and destroy the weaker Daramar lines. We took hits, used hand signals, and absorbed enemy fire while continuing our offensive. Drill Sergeant Killjoy nodded in agreement. It's because of our low-tech advantage that the Daramar couldn't maneuver their troops around us. While you all huddled behind your fancy suits, we cleared the battlefield. The room fell silent, with the human recruits glancing sideways at the aliens beside them, clearly perplexed by the simplicity of the suit. It doesn't generate a force field, Drill Sergeant Harrison said, tapping the chest plate of the armor. It doesn't serve you breakfast or bake you a cake, but it will keep you alive as long as the enemy doesn't get too creative. Drill Sergeant Killjoy chuckled. The weak points are in the back of the legs, the buttocks, and the gaps in the armor around the joints to allow movement. Normally, your training will help you cover these weak spots, and today, that's what you're going to learn. A loud klaxon sounded once, and what seemed like the back wall of the training room began to rise. Alina's exhaustion grew as she realized that it was actually an obstacle course, complete with berms, pillars, walls, and a range. She let out a quiet breath, rubbing her temples. The stars above are going to shoot us, she muttered. Leo murmured in agreement. Explains why the suits have so many patched holes, pointing to the training suits hanging in the racks. Alina groaned, showing her fangs. So they've always worn armor? Asked a pink-feathered Optican, looking up at videos of humans practicing in ancient metal armor. Why? Miss Rimmicky giggled. You know, I don't really know. I think humans have always associated armor with warriors back in the days of melee weapons. They had all sorts of armored suits, like these knights they called them. But as they got more advanced, they stopped wearing those goofy things, right? Tinto, the black Yorpal, chewed on her digipen. But as they got more advanced, they made field generators into suits of Alvaric weave, right? She asked in alarm, looking over to another Yorpal, Layla, whose ears were pinned back, thinking of her sister on Earth. Exoskeletons, adaptive armor, trauma gel. Miss Rimmicky clicked her tongue and placed her hands on her wide hips, then looked back at the display. Well, not exactly. When humans say low-tech, they really mean it. Alina gasped for air, the new helmet barely giving her enough room to breathe with her snout. These helmets had been designed for the Yorpal and Karlikan, with small notches for their ears, while the Jinn wore another specialized helmet that fit snugly over their faces, preserving their privacy. Inside the helmet was a small HVAC system to keep her head cool, and she was grateful for it as her visor stayed clear. While they were running through the obstacle course, Drill Sergeant Killjoy reminisced about how the first humans to use these helmets in the field had to break off the visor when the Daramar's EMP and TMP attack had fried the electronics. "We charged across the field like knights of old," he said, his voice full of nostalgia. "You had to be there to understand we'd never felt more alive." Alina took a deep breath and leaped over the last wall, wishing the humans had added some kind of inner mechanism to help her carry the weight. Instead, she was left to bear the full weight of the combat armor on her own, and something told her that this wouldn't be the last time she'd be wearing it. As Alina ran, the combat armor stayed close to her body, tightening and loosening automatically with the soft hum of micro-adjusters working inside. The arm and shoulder pieces contained tiny motors that helped reduce the overall weight on her arms by a few pounds, relying entirely on biomechanical elements. These systems were powered by her body heat, and she was thankful for them. At least the Carlingen were struggling because their body heat was too low at first to fully power their suits, but they were starting to adjust as they began moving faster. The Poit, wearing much smaller combat suits, were lagging behind, along with the Yorpal, while the Carlingen and Jin excelled. This was partly a team exercise for the Poit, as they had to assist each other over the taller walls and learn how to manage the limitations of their armor's micro-motors. Somehow, the humans had figured out how to use minimal shielding on these motors, making them nearly impossible to disable, except with direct blunt force trauma. Alina groaned as she panted up a slight concrete slope and was forced to duck and roll under gaps in walls, feeling the armor puff air into the inner padding to absorb the blunt force. As she and a male Yorpal with dusky red fur both rolled at the same time, they staggered to their feet, clearly off balance. "Could use some more cushion," the male Yorpal growled, holding his hand to his right buttock as his helmet modulated his voice through the speaker. Alina nodded, turning toward him. "I felt most of that." A pink Yorpal rolled, got to her feet, then collapsed onto her chest, skidding down the concrete hill with a screech and a yelp as her armor scraped against the ground. "She felt all of that," the male Yorpal muttered, which made Alina laugh. The next obstacle required crawling, so they did, sticking together as usual. They followed Alina, out of habit, despite the weight of their armor slowing them down. When they emerged from the other side of the obstacle, their armor was covered in sand, and they rocked back and forth, gasping for breath. "These are so stupid!" Another yellow female Yorpal raged from inside her helmet, her voice distorted by the speaker. "Who the Korik just wears a suit of armor plate?" A green male Yorpal nodded, leaning forward to rest his hands on his knees. "They don't even have an exoskeleton inside these things. It's just micromotors that do barely enough to make you wish they did more. Our combat suits even have microsuits inside of them." "How are humans just using these as is?" another Yorpal asked, sounding exhausted. As if on cue, a group of human recruits ran past them out of the obstacle they had just completed, playfully slapping the Yorpal on their helmets or shoulders as they went by. Alina watched them, feeling a deep sense of shame as even the human women seemed to move with ease in their armor. "I hate them sometimes," the pink Yorpal growled, her tail swishing angrily. "I really, really hate them." The remaining obstacles came and went, with the Poit finishing last, as expected. The training halted at the far end of the warehouse, but Alina immediately disliked the look of this section. 10 humans were lined up in front of what was clearly a shooting range, each holding different kinds of pistols and rifles, with the last one wielding a large-caliber sniper rifle. The range itself looked like another obstacle course, but this one had walls, doors, windows, a long hallway, and what seemed to be a trench. What was most unsettling was that the range ran directly toward the humans with the weapons. "All of you will be shot," Drill Sergeant Harrison announced loudly to all the recruits, both human and alien. "All of you will bear the honor mark of recruits who've passed through training. At the end of the range, you'll be shot in the right thigh to demonstrate how your armor functions and prove that it will keep you from bleeding out. The first shot will be from a high-caliber sniper rifle aimed at your chest, which will probably make you see stars. The second will come from a rifle to the top of your helmet, and the third will target your leg armor, and so on. At the end of the course, Sergeant First Class Jessica will use her accuracy with pistols to shoot you between the gaps in your leg armor, while on the move, aiming for your thigh. Don't be ashamed if you fall, it hurts like a bitch." At least here, at the end of the training, the humans looked as nervous as the Star citizens. "First up will be Specialist Alina," Drill Sergeant Harrison said proudly, then motioned for the yellow-furred Yorpal to move to the yellow line on the floor. "Me?" Alina wailed, gesturing to the human recruits beside her. "You usually make the humans go first." Drill Sergeant Harrison stamped her boot on the yellow line. "Get the fuck up here, specialist." Alina stomped her combat boots angrily, swinging her arms as she cursed in her native tongue, then stalked up to the yellow line. Written on the ground were her instructions, the first simply saying, "Go through the door at a run." The door had no knob or lock, clearly hanging loose on its hinges. Alina cursed loudly in frustration before breaking into a run, the micromotors in her armor humming and whirring as she pumped her arms. She crashed through the door, using her armored shoulder to force it open, only to be immediately slammed by the impact of a 338 Lapua Magnum round into her chest, hitting her like a freight train. The air was knocked from her lungs, despite the body armor trying to absorb the brunt of the impact, and her chest felt as though it had been struck with a hammer. She stumbled forward, arms flailing for balance, but she was still alive. Looking down at her chest plate, she saw a ragged chunk of armor missing, but it had stopped the round. "Continue." Drill Sergeant Harrison's voice echoed over the intercom, and Alina struggled to regain her breath as she stumbled toward the next obstacle. She followed the floor's instructions, hurdling a low wall, though her head jerked back, ripping her paws off the ground. She landed with a hard exhale, the thinner backplate absorbing the impact. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps now, panic settling in as her vision swam inside her helmet. There was no hole, no blood, just a dent on the helmet where the bullet had glanced off. Her helmet display beeped in her ear, showing her where she had been hit. It listed the shot in her chest, still smarting from the impact, and the glancing blow off her helmet. The readout above these said, "Non-compromised 97% survivability." "Well, that's neat," Alina panted, then pushed herself up, rolling to her feet with a swish of her tail. 2 down, 8 to go. But the next 8 obstacles hit her hard, and it felt as though they were getting more personal with each step. The veterans stationed downrange were crack shots, with one rifle round catching her in the thigh armor and ripping her leg out from under her, making her stumble. Then she heard the sniper rifle fire, apparently aimed at someone behind her. When the 7th shot rang out and struck her shoulder pad, she could now see that all the range safety officers were hardened veterans. Each bore the scars of their service, with one male human even sporting a fully mechanical leg, decorated with etched carvings that resembled tattoos. As 2 more shots bounced off her chest plate and arm armor, Alina adjusted, following the instructions on the floor to position her arms correctly to close the armor gaps. It was then that she made eye contact with the last shooter, Sergeant First Class Jessica. For a human, she was extremely cute. Alina had to admit, standing at just 5'2" and probably around 100 pounds. She was stunning, with her chemically dyed bright blue hair. She smiled brightly at Alina, and Alina, despite herself, smiled back under her helmet. But that smile faded when Sergeant First Class Jessica raised her advanced pistol to eye level and waved her free hand at Alina. "Say cheese," the human giggled, then expertly fired a heavy caliber pistol round straight through Alina's leg. Alina had been running, and the shot made her scream in pain as she dropped to her knee, sliding along the concrete before rolling and tumbling across the ground. Her helmet let out a sharp alert, reading out the injury as her thigh took a bullet. Then the sharp puncture of her breastplate was followed by another scream from Alina as a round tore through her upper chest. But oddly, the pain seemed to fade quickly. She rolled into a sitting position and looked down at her leg, surprised to find that it wasn't bleeding. "Oh, wow," Alina said, her mind foggy from the painkillers, tilting her head at the sight of the wound. "Look at that. Stop the bleeding almost instantly, blood-transported medical nanobots?" "You're a sharp one," a male medic said as he grabbed Alina by her drag handle and pulled her out of the way. "Yeah, the suit injects nanotech that heals the wound. You'll see it stitching your leg together." Alina blinked at the small hole in her leg as it quickly sealed up into a neat white scar, even growing back hair, though it was white. "Huh? Wait, my suit thingy didn't work," Alina murmured. "You guys said it stopped pistol rounds." The medic chuckled and shook his head as another medic ran past him, grabbing a Carlican who had also been shot in the thigh. "Yeah, don't worry about that. That round is designed to kill anything at close range," the medic said with a laugh. "It's a pistol round made to punch through light armor, so it lets you recruits know the limitations of the undersuit, but it also leaves an extremely clean wound channel." Alina shrugged, the combat stimulant hitting its peak as her body metabolized it. "Huh, all right then. That Jessica person sure is cute. Did you see her hair? It's blue. Do humans always dye their hair like that? I read about you guys, you don't have blue hair. The medic laughed and shook his head as he deposited Alina in the recovery area. A few other minor medical personnel jogged over to check her suit readings. They really need to tone down the dosage on new recruits. One said, do they really have to give them the full charge? Alina happily munched on a pack of cream cookies, her helmet resting between her legs. Leo plopped down next to her and she waved her hand in his face with a wide, painless smile. Leo, they give you cookies. Great, Leo muttered, glancing down at the ragged hole in his leg. They shot me, I thought the suit stopped pistol rounds. Alina giggled with a cheek full of cream.